April 1944, near Naples. Michael Donnelly prepared a village church for evening service. The front line had moved north. The roads were still broken. Inside the church, 18 wooden pews faced a cracked altar, 2 candles, and a silver chalice. A U.S. Army chaplain checked the cloth, the candles, and the small bottle of sacramental wine. Then a GI stepped out of the side aisle. His uniform was covered in dust. His lips were split. He picked up the chalice with both hands. Then he drank from it. Not from a canteen, not from a ration cup, from the altar. The chaplain froze. 4 soldiers saw it happen. 1 sergeant turned and left the church. By nightfall, the report had started moving. This is what Patton did. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II that test what victory really costs. Michael Donnelly, Boston, 39. He'd been a U.S. Army chaplain for 11 years. He'd seen field burials, roadside confessions, last rites under fire. But he'd never seen a soldier drink from an altar. The church stood 2 miles off a supply road, just outside Naples. Its roof had been hit once. 3 tiles were missing. Rain had dried in long stains across the walls. Donnelly had arrived at 16:00 hours with a jeep and 2 enlisted men. He carried 1 wooden crate. Inside were 12 small candles, 1 linen cloth, and a single bottle of sacramental wine. He placed the cloth on the altar, smoothed it twice, scented the chalice. Routine mattered. It was the one thing that stayed the same. Outside, 200 soldiers rotated through a rest position. Some had not slept more than 3 hours in 2 days. Water rations had been cut to 1 canteen per man since the previous afternoon. Supply trucks were delayed. 2 had broken down. 1 had been shelled. Men were thirsty, not uncomfortable, not irritated, thirsty in a way that made them stop talking. The soldier who entered the church did not speak. He moved straight to the altar. No hesitation, no glance left or right. Donnelly saw the man's hands first. They were shaking. The silver caught the light when he lifted it. The sound of liquid moving inside the cup carried across the room. 4 soldiers stood near the entrance. They said nothing. The man drank for 5 seconds, then 6, then longer, when he lowered the chalice. A line of red ran down the side. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, set the cup back in place. Not carefully, just enough. The cloth shifted. Donnelly stepped forward. Private. That's consecrated wine. The soldier looked at him. I needed it. He did not move. Donnelly said nothing for 3 seconds. Then he turned, walked out past the pews. Outside, a sergeant was already waiting. Report this, Donnelly said. The sergeant nodded once. Within 20 minutes, a note was written. At 17:30, it reached a lieutenant. By 19:00, it was on a captain's desk. The church doors remained open. The chalice stayed where it was, and the service was still scheduled for 20:00 hours. The decision to report it was simple. What happened next would not be. James Walker, Chicago, 31. He'd been an infantry squad sergeant for 4 years. He'd seen men break under shelling, men freeze under fire, men walk off roads and never return. But he'd never seen a soldier drink from an altar. Walker found the private sitting on a stone step outside the church, helmet off, head down. His canteen hung empty from his belt. Walker stood over him. You went inside? The private nodded. Walker pointed back toward the door. You drank from that? Yes. The private did not look up. Walker took the canteen, turned it upside down. Nothing came out. How long? Since yesterday morning. Walker said nothing for 4 seconds. He looked at the man's lips, cracked, bleeding at the corners. You know what that was. The private nodded again. Walker exhaled once. Then he turned. Get up. You're coming with me. The private pushed himself to his feet slowly. Walker did not touch him. He walked ahead, straight toward the command tent. Walker walked out, went straight to Lieutenant Harris. Robert Harris, Philadelphia, 27. He'd been a platoon leader for 14 months. He'd seen orders ignored, lines broken, men refused to move forward, but he'd never seen a report like this. Harris read the note once, then again. He looked up at Walker. This is accurate. Walker nodded. I saw him after. He hasn't had water for over a day. Harris folded the paper, looked towards the church. 150 yards away. Chaplain confirms it. Yes. Harris stepped outside the tent. The private stood 10 feet away. Harris walked up to him. You understand what you did? The private met his eyes. I drank wine. Harris held the stare for 2 seconds. That wasn't wine. It was liquid. Walker shifted his weight. Harris said nothing for a moment. Then, you took it from an altar. Yes. Harris turned slightly, looking back toward the church again. 80 men were expected at service. 1 chalice, 1 bottle, now partially gone. He looked back at the private. You could have waited. The private shook his head once. No. Harris inhaled, slow. Then he spoke. I can't resolve this here. He folded the report again, added 1 line. At 1930, it was sent up. Thomas Reed, Cleveland, 42. He'd been a regimental commander for 2 years. He'd seen courts-martial, field punishments, and command failures that cost lives. But he'd never seen a case where discipline and survival collided this cleanly. Reed read the report at 21:00 hours, sat alone at a wooden table. A single lamp. He read every line. Then he read it again. The chaplain's statement, the sergeant's note, the lieutenant's addition. He placed the paper down, called for the private. The man stood in front of him 3 minutes later. Reed looked at him for a long time. You drank from a consecrated chalice. Yes. Sir. You knew it. Yes. Sir. Reed leaned back slightly. You also hadn't had water in 36 hours. Yes. Sir. Reed tapped the paper once. If I punish you, I punish a man for staying alive. The private said nothing. If I don't, I tell 200 men that orders don't matter. Silence. 5 seconds. Reed stood up, walked to the edge of the tent, looked out toward the church. Lights were on inside. Service had begun. Voices carried faintly. He turned back. I don't have the authority to decide this. He picked up the report, added his signature at 07:00 the next morning. It was forwarded. By the next morning, it was sitting on Patton's desk. The report arrived at 08:30 hours. George S. Patton read it once. Then again, his thumb pressed the edge of the paper. He set it down flat on the desk. A soldier drank consecrated wine from an altar because he had no water. He did not look up. Get my driver. An aide stepped forward. Sir, this is a regimental matter. Patton cut him off. I'm going. The jeep left headquarters at 09:05. Dust followed it for half a mile. They reached the village at 09:40. The church doors were still open. Inside, 12 soldiers sat scattered across the pews. The chaplain stood near the altar. The chalice was back in place, half full. Patton stepped out of the jeep in full combat uniform, 4 stars painted on his helmet, ivory-handled revolvers at his belt. He walked straight to the entrance. No one spoke. A corporal near the door stepped aside without being told. A man in the third row stood up, then stopped halfway. The chaplain turned and held his position. The soldier stood near the side wall, 10 feet from the altar, hands at his sides. Patton entered the church and looked once at the chalice, then at the man. He said nothing. The room went still. Patton stood 6 feet from the altar. He looked at the cloth, at the rim of the chalice, at the faint line where liquid had dried. He said nothing. The chaplain stepped forward. "General, the wine was consecrated less than 2 hours before service." He held his hands together in front of him. "It was meant for 80 men. Patton did not answer. He shifted his gaze to the soldier. The soldier spoke first. "I hadn't had water since yesterday morning." He kept his eyes forward. "I saw liquid. I drank. No movement in the room." Patton tilted his head slightly. "You knew where you were?" "Yes." "Sir." "You knew what that was?" "Yes." "Sir." The soldier swallowed once. Patton took one step closer to the altar. He placed his fingers on the edge of the cloth, smoothed it once. Then he spoke. "War strips men down to what they can survive." A pause. "But if survival is all you keep, you have already lost the reason you're here." Silence. "You will refill that chalice." He did not look away from the altar. "You will do it under the chaplain's supervision." The soldier nodded once. His hands did not move. Patton continued. "You will stand here for the next service." A pause. "Not as punishment." The room stayed still. "As witness." The soldier said nothing. His jaw tightened. Patton turned slightly toward the chaplain. "Proceed with service as scheduled." The chaplain nodded. He did not speak. Patton stepped back once. He looked at the soldier again. "After that, you return to your unit." A brief pause. No charges. The soldier's shoulders lowered by a fraction. He did not move. Patton's voice stayed flat. "You don't win a war by losing what you're fighting for." No one answered. Patton turned, walked past the pews. Out the same door, he entered. Behind him, the chaplain moved to the altar. The soldier stepped forward. He picked up the empty bottle. The cloth stayed straight. The chalice stayed centered. The service began. Patton did not look back. Within 2 hours, the chalice was full again. The soldier stood alone through the entire 40-minute service. No one spoke to him when it ended. He walked out and rejoined his unit 300 yards away. The next morning at 06:00, water rations were increased by 1 additional canteen per 5 men in that sector. The church remained open. Services continued every evening at 20:00 hours. No further incidents were reported. Years later, the chaplain who witnessed it said, "He wasn't punished. He was shown what the act meant." Patton never mentioned it publicly. In his diary, he wrote only one line: "Discipline is what remains when everything else is gone." The soldier had not lied. He was thirsty. He needed water. But the chalice was not just a cup. It represented something the army claimed to protect, something beyond survival. 1 act, 2 meanings, both real. Would you have done the same to stay alive, or protected the symbol even then? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the moral lines soldiers faced in World War II, make sure to subscribe.